Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is if you have your sun in Aries and your moon in Gemini. Aries and Gemini form a sextile, and that is a friendly angle. These two elements blend nicely together, fire and air. And it's funny, I remember one day when I was in my late teens, I was walking down the street and I met this man who I became friends with, who was a lot older than I was. And I am a Sagittarius, and he was a Libra. And he asked me what sign I was, and he said that air fans flames, and that fire feeds air, something like that. But I remember that really intrigued me, and that's exactly what happens here. Now, why is that important? Well, the sun sign in fire means that this is the most important influence of all the planets and signs in your chart. This is why we say, what's your sign? We're not talking about your Venus sign or even your moon sign. We're talking about your sun sign. So it's really what you came here to do, to shine your light on the world. And shining your light means your individual gifts. But it's not just gifts, it's also your vantage point. That's really what creativity is, or your essence is. It's something that no one else can do. It's like you can have 10 different film directors, and maybe they wrote the movies too, and they're going to, even if they approach the same subject matter, like love, they are going to do it in their own way, and they're going to express themselves from their own vantage points. That's what makes art so magical, is because it's created by an individual, and it is unique from that perspective. When people copy other people artistically, then we call it derivative. So anyway, that's the sun sign of Aries, and there's that brash quality of Aries, being ruled by Mars, the god of war, and impatience, a sense of urgency. That's because of the Mars influence. And so Aries people tend to be very active. Aries rules the first house in astrology, which is the house of the self. So there's definitely an individualistic stamp on people who are born under the sign of Aries, and to a similar degree, all fire signs. So also Leo and Sagittarius. Fire is all about individuality and freedom. The moon in Gemini. Gemini is ruled by Mercury, and it's an air sign. Air signs are the communicators, and they're also the intellectuals. They're coming from the mind, the perspective of the mind, whereas the fire signs are coming from a perspective of the individual self, and they're expressing through fire enthusiasm, creativity, and a sense of rebellion, I would even say. The air signs are cooler because it's the abstract mind, and so they can be very detached. So when your moon sign is your emotional nature, and therefore people who are born under a moon sign that's air, and the other air signs besides Gemini are Libra and Aquarius, tend to have a more detached emotional nature. Now, in this particular case, because the sun sign is Aries, and Aries is very irascible, or very easily triggered, let's say, it could be a little bit modified from what I'm saying. When I talk about these influences, I'm talking about them in an isolated way. we have to also combine it with the sun sign and, truth be told, the ascendant, the rising sign, because that is going to be how people see you, especially if they don't know you very well. So what about if you have an earth sign ascendant like Capricorn? You might be very serious, a lot more serious than this combination would be otherwise. This combination, if you just take it by itself, could almost be misunderstood by some people as immature. And one of the main reasons for this is that Aries is the first sign of the zodiac and is connected to infancy. I always joke about, the Aries tendency, and this could be especially true with people who have the moon in Aries, to have grand mal hissy fits. The first sign of the zodiac, but also the first fire sign, and Gemini is the first air sign. So there's a fresh quality with this combination. It's a very playful combination, but it can be seen, or we could say misunderstood by some people as immature, although there may be immature qualities present, because immaturity is really being undeveloped. And sometimes I would say with Aries, one of the problems that you get into is your impatience, because it's like that can even lead to your anger, because you're ruled by Mars, and in astrology, Mars is how we deal with our anger. So also look to your Mars sign to see how that plays into things. If you have like a trine between your moon and Mars, like if it's in another air sign, then that would immensely improve the situation. So maybe even, well, conjunction, not really. If your Mars is in Gemini too, and it forms a conjunction, then that can almost be like the moon in Aries. So that would be more fiery in a sense. But I'm talking about like if your Mars is in like Aquarius, for instance, then you might have much more emotional restraint, and actually be quite constructive in how you deal with, frustration and things like that. So the moon in astrology, like I said, is about our emotional nature, and this is what makes us feel safe. So with Gemini, I would say that people with the moon in Gemini can feel safe when they don't have to encounter heavy emotional scenes. So if you are involved with somebody, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a romantic partner, it could be like a parent-child relationship, or if you're the parent, parent-child relationship can cover all the bases, I guess, whether you're the parent or you're the child. You may find it hard to relate to people that are very intense emotionally. So an example is obviously Scorpio, which is known for that, but even like a Cancer person, which sometimes Aries sun signs attract. It can be a little bit overwhelming for you, or even tedious to have to deal with somebody who is on a regular basis very, emotive, always maybe needing reassurance emotionally, or just expressing strong emotions, because you are the type, I could see somebody with the moon in Gemini where you might use humor as a way to diffuse emotional situations, and that keeps you protected from that. Also, the moon in astrology can indicate fluctuations. So for sure, somebody who has the moon in Gemini may be very emotionally changeable. So I suppose if other factors support it, that you might be moody, but I do reserve the right to have the opinion that it's probably more like on the surface, so to speak, because I do think sometimes that people with the moon in Gemini have shallow emotions. Again, this is going to depend on other influences. I mean, if you have the moon in the 12th house or you have the moon in the 8th house, it's not going to be the case, okay? Or even the 4th house. It could be changed with, I mean, if you have the moon in conjunction with Pluto, it's not going to be like that. So it really does depend on other factors. But in general, I would say that this combination really wants novel experiences. In other words, you really like new stimulation, constant stimulation. This could be a combination that is ADD or ADHD. And when I say that those kinds of terms, obviously, I hope it goes without saying that I'm not talking about the literal medical definition or whatever you would call it. I'm talking about just like a descriptive term for people who have a hard time sitting still, who have a hard time, with things that are predictable or familiar, who are always seeking out the new, the fresh, the latest. I could see this combination having to go to the new movie that everybody's been talking about on the first night and not being able to wait, or, and always wanting to be the one who does it first, or whatever. But even though Mercury is, specializes in our thoughts and the state of our mind, what kind of ways we communicate and how we take in information, I believe that the moon sign can really connect with our opinions and whether we are opinionated. And I think that the moon in Gemini is one of those signs that is very opinionated, has a thought on everything, and that is part of the emotional nature. Even though these are ideas, they're coming from the emotions that are generated when thinking about these issues. So, a challenge here is the fact that the moon and Gemini person may have different opinions depending on which day it is. They're so changeable and maybe even indecisive about, whether they want to believe in this or believe in that. So, what I would say in terms of, like, usually I don't talk about the moon sign to talk about professions or anything along those lines. I mean, this is more, I would say it can be well suited for anything where you are inspiring others. I could see this combination as a life coach, where you're teaching people how to think more positively about their life as a whole, inspiring them to improve their life. And I could see someone with this combination being able to do it because Aries is a cardinal sign, so it tends to go into positions of authority, and also as a fire sign wanting to be inspirational. With the moon in Gemini, there is this analytical side of the person that can see, and analytical psychologically, where you can see how people get triggered, how people get discouraged. And also, it's really great too for someone who is doing some kind of counseling or coaching, because you don't get sucked into somebody else's problems because you have enough of that emotional detachment. But the Aries energy is always so active and can do that that's very helpful for moving someone along their path so that they're not just kind of spinning their wheels. This can be a combination where a 9 to 5 job may not cut it because it's too monotonous. You just tend to crave that novelty. And novelty doesn't mean that you have to be in a different country every day, or something like that. It could simply be that whatever it is that you're doing, you have enough freedom in your own life apart from this that you're able to, do those self-care practices, or just, enjoy yourself and feel that freedom. But when you're doing your work, it could also be something that you don't feel like you're confined. So if a person's a digital nomad, for instance, I could see this combination doing that, because the cardinal modality is really good about going after things, but even about maybe taking charge of their own life. And the moon in a mutable sign like Gemini makes you emotionally adaptable, which is important as well. This combination in love needs someone who's a fellow adventurer. And if you have a rising sign that is in water or earth, you may attract water or earth signs because you have a part of yourself that is behaving like that, especially when they first lay eyes on you, which can be a very powerful moment when you meet a person that you end up having a relationship with. And plus, somebody who's an Aries, your Mars might be in Taurus. You might have Venus in Pisces. And therefore, you have that side of yourself that might be more domesticated and into things. And, you also have to look at the chart itself. So obviously, when I make these pronouncements, I'm doing so in kind of a broad brush way, but obviously when you interpret an individual chart, there's going to be so much more to work with. So it's important to honor your individuality as well as your need for freedom, and not settle for someone who may give you that sense of security because they're very grounded, like an earth sign. And, there are times when that would be the perfect person for you. That has nothing to do with what I'm saying, but I think that I'm talking about the kind of traps that this combination can get into, is that you are, I don't want to say flighty, but the moon in Gemini can make you rather ADD, going here, going there, just almost like Mercury in Gemini, just kind of flitting around and not necessarily having, like, even emotionally having a core emotional opinion about something. I don't know how else to say it. And I have called that fickleness in love, because a person may love someone one day and be indifferent the next. Again, the moon is our emotional nature, but Gemini is an air sign and it can be quite detached. Aries is a fire sign, and it can be very ardent, it can be very passionate, but it needs freedom, and it will fight for its freedom. It will kind of like push away from anyone who is trying to smother you, possess you. At first, I think that this is one of the things with Aries, you might get attracted to them physically, and then you kind of go along with the program, but then after a while, you're like, whoa, wait a minute, what's going on here? This is not what I signed up for. So it's very important to honor your need for freedom, and it's freedom, but it's also this sense of somebody who keeps you on your toes, who isn't predictable. That is something that Aries people, Gemini people, they need. There's nothing superficial about that. It's like treating life as an adventure. You want somebody who's adventurous. You don't want a couch potato in your life. Okay, that's what I have for you. I hope that this resonated. If you'd like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.